Hello, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Book. My name is John Christian. My guest today is self-published author Shami Stovall. Her BA in History and Juris Doctorate has helped her become a full-time writer. In this episode, she will be discussing an 8-book series called The Frith Chronicles. It's going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned. Hi, Shami. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. I was looking over your books that you have online. My goodness, there's 17 of them with just your name on it. But today we're going to talk about the Frith Chronicles. Is that it?
Yeah, my YA fantasy series I just completed.
There's 8 books in there, I believe.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, let's go. Tell me all about them.
Um, well, I guess I should start off with my inspiration because I really like things like Pokemon or Digimon or any sort of you got to catch a whole bunch of monsters, collect monsters, raise monsters, have fun interactions and adventures with monsters. When I was growing up, I super loved all of those ideas. I also really liked books like Dragon Riders of Pern, where you have a telepathic bond to a super special dragon that you fly around on. Um, so I really love that as a concept, just generally. So when I was thinking of the Frith Chronicles, I wanted something like that. I wanted something where you could have a magical familiar companion. Um, and what I did was I made a magic system based off of whatever you bond with, that's the type of magics you would get. So, for example, like unicorns are known for being immune to poison. Like in mythology, unicorns, you can't be poisoned. So, in my world, if you bonded with a unicorn, you would gain poison immunity. Sorry, I have a little puppy. If he barks in the background, it's just because he's playing
I've
with the
got
other
two of
puppy.
them. It's okay. Hopefully they won't bark.
Um, so if you bond with a unicorn, you get poison immunity, and if you bonded with a dragon, or maybe you would have some sort of fire powers, or if you bonded with a phoenix, you might be able to, you would also
Sure.
have some fire powers, but maybe some healing powers,
Yeah.
just based on the creature, whatever mythological. It's just
Don't worry
over there
about it.
barking.
It's all organic. I love it. It's great.
Um, so whatever you bond with is the type of magics you would get.
All right.
And so, everybody in the world, depending on what they're bonded to, they get these other powers. They learn and develop their powers. And I also set the world in the Age of Sail. So I have a history degree, and I feel like the only time I ever use my history degree is in writing books. So there are lots of points in history that I felt like are super interesting, but I don't really see them that often in the literature I read. The Age of Sail is definitely one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, if I read something set in Age of Sail, it's all about pirates or privateers. And don't get me wrong, I've got pirates in my books too,
I
but
see that.
they're not the main focus. I'm not talking about being a pirate crew or something. They're just, they're bad guys in the background. Um, I really liked the idea of, sailing from place to place, island ports, free ports, the types of ports where if you're there, there's no real law and other things like that. So it's the Age of Sail. People bond with magical creatures. We get cool magical powers. Um, and the main character really wants to be like a almost like a fairy tale style hero. He grew up reading swashbuckler tales and really wants to be an epic swashbuckler like the heroes he read about. And specifically, one hero works at a guild and he goes to the guild. He apprentices there. And in the very first book, he discovers that his longtime, lifelong hero might be a villain. So it turns out that, not too many spoilers, but it's kind of in the back little blurb. So if I'm spoiling it, it's in big fat quotes. It turns out that his hero is a murderer and he needs to basically take him down. So that kind of,
Yeah.
fun adventure.
Fun stuff. Hard to talk about books without spoiling it a bit.
Yeah.
Now you haven't mentioned any titles, and I'm going to show the audience your book covers. Let's run through them briefly, one at a time, so that people could have a time to digest these wonderful, book covers. By the way, and I'm sure the stories are great too. So let's go at it that way.
Okay. Um, the first one is Nightmare Arcanist. So a nightmare is a creature in the world, and it's basically a sentient suit of armor. Like it's just hollow inside. And that is what the main character bonds with. So that's his like familiar is this sentient suit of armor.
Right.
The second book is called Dread Pirate Arcanist. And so in the second book is where he actually deals with the pirate. So in the first book, he's in a guild, turns out that his hero might be a villain. In the second book, we deal with the Dread Pirate Callisto. The third book is called Colosseum Arcanist. And in that book, they travel to a city where there is a grand tournament. And so he participates in the tournament as like a fighter. So Colosseum Arcanist. The next one is called Plague Arcanist. And I guess it would be, I guess lots of spoilers here, because it's difficult to explain the title without at least kind of talking about the plot. The background thread to the entire series is that there is an arcane plague that when you contract it, you basically go insane and monstrous. So if the magical creatures get it, they turn into monstrous versions of whatever they are. So if you have a unicorn, it might turn into a monstrous version of a unicorn. If you have a dragon, it turns into a freakish zombie dragon. And in Plague Arcanist, it turns out that somebody has made this plague specifically to spread it around for nefarious purposes. So in the fourth book, we talk a lot about that. In the next one, World Serpent Arcanist, it turns out that there are godlike magical creatures. And I pulled this from mythology because there are so many mythologies where there is like an epic creature of some sort. So like the World Serpent. So obviously it's called World Serpent Arcanist because the World Serpent, very, very famous in Norse mythology. I have the Fenris wolf in there too. I don't know if you're familiar with like Hindu style stuff, but the Garuda bird is like yeah. So those types of creatures, like very famous named creatures from mythology, have basically come into the world.
Neat.
So we deal with that. And then in the next book, Warlord Arcanist, we're still dealing with those god creatures, but now people are taking sides. It's that there's a war brewing. And then Master and Grandmaster Arcanist, both of those are the conclusion of the series where we wrap up the war, plague is dealt with, that everything comes together in a nice end.
Wow. And how long did it take you to write all this?
I believe the first book came out in 2019, and so it's now 2023. So
yeah,
4 years.
You're busy.
Yeah.
Well, how long is each book? Is it like a novella or a full novel?
Oh, they're full novels. The first one's probably the shortest. I think it's about 90K.
Okay.
Which is about the length of a standard novel, and then every other book after that is like 140K. So a little bit longer, but not too long.
Well, it sounds like you've had a lot of fun writing.
Oh yeah, definitely my passion.
And how did that come to be? You say you have a history major, you're a degree in history. At what point in your life did you think, I got to write a book? I mean, it's just in me. I got to get it out.
When I was in law school, actually. So I got my history degree. I went to law school to become an attorney. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. So I was the dungeon master. I don't know if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons.
I haven't, but I've seen it. I've seen it being played.
Oh, okay. Well, so the dungeon master usually has to come up with a story and all the characters in the story, because as the dungeon master, you basically play everybody else outside of the characters. So the characters have their, they play one person, but the DM has to play everybody. And I came up with my own stories. Now, sometimes D&D puts out little instruction manuals, and they're like, hey, if you can't think of a story, here's this preset story. Just read off the script here and just do the preset story. I never liked their preset stories, so I always made up my own. And everybody was always like, oh man, Shami, your stories are so great. I remember them like way after we're done playing the game. I think about them a lot, and I'm like, oh, okay. And that's when I decided that I was going to try and write a book, because so many people were like, well, your stories are so interesting. You should do that.
Yeah.
And so I did. And the people who read it were like, wow, this is so great. You should pursue this actively.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you, how are book sales for you? You have so many of them, including these chronicles. How's that doing?
Good. I'm a full-time author. That's all I do is write books.
Excellent.
I stopped being an attorney because my book sales were good
Wow.
enough.
Wow.
So,
Good for you.
yeah. Um, I know that it can be a struggle. A lot of new authors sometimes really struggle with it, but if you treat it like a business, so I have an advertising budget. I created a business here in the United States, so I guess I used my law degree to start, like an LLC,
Hmm.
and I run the business like anybody opening a donut shop. You know what I'm saying? Like
Sure.
some people open restaurants and it doesn't work for them, and some people open restaurants and they're a restaurateur. Like that's what they do for the rest of their life. So I treat it more like, you know, it's a business. I advertise the books. I have a return on investment. I make my money. I run my publishing house basically. So that's what I do.
Cool. Cool. And I guess you have it edited professionally.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Now the covers, they're beautiful.
Yeah. Darko is the artist. I credit him in every single one of the books and like the legal page, where I'm like, here's who edited it, here's who did the cover art, all that kind of stuff. He actually lives in Serbia, in Belgrade. Um, he is fantastic. Anytime anybody asks me about the covers, I always link him to his portfolio. He super professional. He does all my book covers. I'll probably hire him until he retires, that kind of thing. So I love
Well,
his work.
there's definitely a stream that goes through it that you can see that it's consistent. So
Hmm.
good for you. You found the right person.
Yeah. Do you have somebody do your covers for you or?
No, I do everything myself. I'm a one-man operation. I am officially retired. The podcast is something I do because I like people. I like talking to interesting people like yourself. And I write because I like to write. I've written over 300 songs. I'm a musician.
Oh,
And
nice.
so now I just write books, stories. But whether I sell them or not, I try to, but I don't
Mm.
depend on that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happily retired.
Well, writing songs feels like a completely different skill set. I don't think I could write songs. I mean, I could attempt it, but it would be pretty bad.
Well, yeah, we all have our own skills. So I just took to writing books around 5 years ago, and it's been fun. It's a great pastime.
What's your favorite like genre to write in?
Right now, I'm really stuck in the fantasy world, the imaginary world, and for me, it has to be a message because certain things happened in my life that I went from one kind of person to another person. I went through a deconstructive phase, and I felt like I needed to talk about that. And rather than just write some biography or some, book about myself, because I decided to do it in a fictional form. So I talk about things like delusion, anti-intellectualism, bigotry, faith, and
Mm.
ultimately the final book will be about love.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So mine has messages and is allegorical.
Most of the time when I write, I guess I don't have like a super specific message. What I usually have is like morals that I really
Hmm.
resonate with. Um, so obviously, I really like good guys versus bad guys. I think probably the stance that I have that I is rare. I don't see it that often. Is and this also comes from my history degree. There was a story in ancient Roman times about Cincinnatus, and I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but he was a farmer, and during a war, they needed someone to take charge, and Cincinnatus was a great strategist, so he commanded the armies, and he rose up to the highest ranks. And once the war was over, he could keep his power and basically become a tyrant, but he gave it up because it was no longer needed, and he returned to his farm life because tyranny and the use of power when you don't need power harms society basically.
Hmm.
So I really like this. It's very hard to write, into a story format, but I really like this gaining power to protect or save or to defend what is right, but giving up power when it's not needed because you don't
Cool.
need to just constantly lord it over people.
Yeah.
Um, so I have a lot of that in my books, but it is very subtle.
Let me ask you something. Since we're having such a good time talking here about this, and we should wrap it up soon, I guess. But are there any is there any lying that goes on in your books? In mine, once in a while, I have characters lie for a good reason to protect and save people, because we're talking about saving. So I tend to think that it's possible to lie for good reasons.
It's funny you say that. In one of my books, called Academy Arcanist, it's actually a side story. The main character is very he lies easily and constantly. And he goes to an academy, and the teacher knows that he's lying because she can hear his thoughts, basically. And she tells him that lying is like any sort of other tool, and like a sword or a gun. You can use lying to harm people and harm things, but you can use it for good purposes. And she tells him that if you have tools in your arsenal, you should always strive to use them for good as opposed to using them for selfish means.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I do have a character who lies, and I did take the time to be like, hey, you can use it. Just like you can use a gun to save people, and you can also use a gun to rob a bank. It just depends on, how you use those tools.
Exactly. Exactly. I surprised myself when I was editing, going, "I'm having this person lie again. Oh, I guess it's good because got these other people saved, and otherwise they would have been in deep trouble."
Hmm.
Well, Shami, it's been a real blast talking to you.
Yeah, that time went quick. In all
It did.
seriousness,
It did.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize we'd gone through it all.
We talked about all kinds of stuff, not just books.
Yeah, all over the place.
Super, super. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, it was
And
great being here. Thank you so much for having me.
oh, you're welcome. And I wish you well in the future. You take care now.
Okay, have fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that's our show for today. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please hit the like button and subscribe. Don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And if you are a self-published author, I would really like to speak with you. Until then, keep on writing and be kind to one another.